In Warhammer 40k, power is everything. The more powerful you are, the greater impact you have on the setting. And in 40k, anyone can gain power. We have those who can make gods, those who capture gods, those who killed gods, and those who are gods. But even amongst their mighty ranks, there is one who stands out.
Hi, Internet!
Because amongst gods and devils, angels and demons, mortals and immortals, none can really compare to Kaldor motherfucking Draigo. But why is he hated by some, memed on by everyone, and earned a place in Warhammer as one of its most infamous characters? In short, what is his story? Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna find that out. So without any further ado, strap on in, buckle up, and let's get cracking on with today's video.
We will provide the herbs!
The story of Kaldor Draigo comes to us courtesy of the Grey Knight Codex 5th edition, a rather infamous codex written by a rather infamous gentleman, the one and only Matthew Ward. For in the early 2000s, when Grey Knights fans cracked open that codex, they were a little worried, to say the least, because the lore that was introduced in there was a bit concerning. We got absolute classics like a bunch of Grey Knights murdering sisters for their blood, to them working together with some Craftworld Elder and even guarding one of their Craftworlds. Needless to say, there was a lot of stuff going on in there that just didn't really make a lot of sense, or was really out there. Now the Grey Knights as a chapter have always been the very special boys. Chapter 666. Yeah, by the way, that designation makes like 0 sense. They're like one of the oldest chapters, yet 666, it's whatever. Point being, they've always meant to be the very special boys. Being crafted directly from the Emperor's very own gene seed means that they are considered his sons, whereas most Space Marines only see the Emperor as their grandsire. Not to mention the fact that they are incredibly potent psychers, with one Grey Knight having enough juice in him to level an entire city. And that's just the base guy. They are the demon killers. They are the hammer of the demons. They are those who hunt the hunters. They are the light that kills the darkness, etc., so on and so forth. That's what they're meant to be. Thus, they were going to be pretty overpowered. Because when you gotta fight demons as your daily 9 to 5, you can't just be rocking that bolter and chainsword. You gotta have something a bit more up your sleeve. And the Grey Knights have that in droves. With their incredibly potent Terminator armor, their master-crafted side weapons, not to mention their own immaculate powers drawn from the warp itself, you expect them to do some crazy shit. And they have. The more elite and badass a unit is, the more elite and badass stuff you expect them to do. But then that begs the question, out of all the lore in that particular little codex, why is it that Kaldor Draigo stands apart so much? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is because of the amount of stuff that he did and how he was introduced, and it's a lot. But ladies and gents, rather than me just waffling on and on and on, how about I actually give you the lore itself so you yourself can judge whether or not Kaldor Draigo's lore was a bit extreme on launch. Taken from Codex Grey Knights, 5th edition. The tale of Kaldor Draigo truly began in the world of Acralem. During the demon incursion of 799 M41, Imkar the Reborn had led forth a demonic army from the realm of chaos, and would be satisfied with nothing less than the ruin of not only Acralem, but the entire Vidar sector. It was inevitable that the Grey Knights would stand against such a threat, together with 9 regiments of Imperial Guard and Space Marines from the Astral Knights and Flesh Terrorist chapters. The Third Brotherhood of the Grey Knights, in whose ranks Drago fought, descended upon the world. What awaited was one of the most terrible battles of that century. There can be little doubt that if the Grey Knights had not been there, Acralem would have fallen. The tide was only turned by that daring strike against Imkar's warp fortress. It was here that Kaldor Draigo, a freshly ennobled battle brother, made a name for himself. It was Drago who dealt the death blow to Imkar, and so cast the demonic horde back into the warp. But the demon clung to life long enough to place a vengeful curse upon his slayer.
Victory is yours this day, mortal. But know that if you ever set foot upon this world again, you and all who follow you shall walk with damnation for 10 millennia.
Victory in Acralem saw Drago acclaimed to the rank of Justicar, the first of many such promotions. For 2 centuries, Drago served his chapter and emperor with unfailing distinction. He earned honors and glory unsurpassed by any Grey Knight before him, save perhaps Yanis himself, foremost of the founders whose deeds had shaped the Imperium in its darkest times. He became Supreme Grand Master in the early days of 901 M41, following the slaughter of the previous chapter lord at the hands of the demon Primarch Mortarion. And his first act was to carve his forebear's name upon Mortarian's rotting heart, an insult that the demon has never forgotten. 200 years to the day since Drago's victory on Acralem, an astropathic distress beacon brought news to Titan that Acralem had been invaded by demons once again. Upon learning this, Drago knew that without a doubt that M'Ka had been reborn, and this was the Demon Prince's attempt to bring true his curse. Having so determined, Drago gave word forbidding his chapter to involve themselves with Acralem, lest others fall prey to the doom that was his burden to bear, a duty his battle brothers bore unwillingly, though, to his knowledge, none disobeyed. Yet the world would not be abandoned to its fate. Drago took ship to Acralem, there to meet his unfolding destiny alone. So it was that Kaldor Draigo, Lord of the Grey Knights, came once again to Acralem. Few words spake he, yet his grim purpose was plain to behold, as he trod old battlefields, reawakened to fresh slaughter. At the seat of Castle Grosheth, it was Drago who unleashed the Psy Flame that swept the demons away, and he who struck down the plague-rotten abomination that commanded the assault. In Trabarin Valley, it was Drago who held rearguard in the narrowest part of the pass, holding the baying hordes of madness at bay, whilst the Cadian 912 fell back. Survivors of the retreat recount that Drago held the rock-strewn corridor for 2 days, never once missing a blow, nor taking a step backward. It would have been hard to judge which side held Kaldor Draigo in the greatest dread, the demons for crippling losses he had dealt upon their kind, or the soldiers and officers of the Imperial Guard, who saw only a silent brute whose armor was slick with the blood of slain hellspawn. The confrontation between Drago and M'Ka took place upon the pinnacle of Shadow Peak, before the swirling warp rift from which the Demon Prince drew his unholy power. As Imperial Guardsmen battled against braying demon hordes, Drago sought his enemy of old, for he knew M'Ka's death would end the demon's plans of reconquest, just as it had so many years ago. On the edge of the rift they battled, the knight and the demon, each using every tactic at their command to break the other's guard. The battlefield rang to the sound of their titanic duel, to the clamorous strike of Nemesis' sword upon demonic blade, of silvered steel upon warp metal. The Demon Prince spat curses and insults at Drago, but his words and sorceries could find no purchase. Again and again, Drago summoned the sanctifying flame, yet M'Ka merely laughed at the charring of his own flesh, and Drago could not keep pace with his adversary forever. M'Ka's blade glowed darkly with warp flame, and he unleashed a blow mightier than any that had preceded it. The demon blade struck home with a dull crack, shattering the Nemesis sword halfway down its length, and driving the Grey Knight to one knee. M'Ka bellowed with victory, and brandished his blade for the final blow. However, Drago was not yet spent. Roaring a battle cry of his own, he rose up from one knee, and double-handed, thrust his sword-severed stump into M'Ka's black heart. With that one blow, Drago delivered Acralem for a second time. As death throes racked M'Ka's body, so too did they begin to tear at the war portal he had summoned. The rift's baleful energies began to disperse, and one by one, the howling demons of his army faded away into nothingness. Yet before the portal was closed completely, M'Ka had one final act of vengeance. With his lost strength, the Demon Prince cast his talons along Drago's throat and heaved the Grey Knight into the collapsing rift. So did Kaldor Draigo pass out of the mortal world and into legend. The tale of Kaldor Draigo did not end that day, as many supposed, for he survived passage into the realm of chaos. Lesser men would have been driven insane by their arrival in the domain of the Chaos Gods, where damnation lurks upon every path. Yet Drago's mind had been long hardened to the madnesses and seductions of chaos, and he endured in this land where no other man could. For an uncounted age, Drago wandered that terrible landscape. His path was strewn by demons foul and fair, who sought to slay him or seduce him to darkness, yet Drago overcame them all. Atop the blood foes, where the acrid ichor of Khorne's fallen champions tumbles endlessly into the void, Drago slew the great bloodthirster Karvoth. With cleansing fire, he drove the demonic taint from the beast's great axe, and used the molten remains to reforge his sword, studded in battle with M'Ka the Reborn so long ago. He unleashed sanctified flame again amongst the writhing jungles of Nurgo's domain, and for a long time, the gusting warp wind carried only a charcoal stench, and the tortured screaming of demonic vegetation. On a journey through the Whispering Meadows, 6 sisters, the chosen handmaidens of Sinesh, sought to tempt Drago with promises of glory, power, and all the myriad riches desired by mortal flesh and spirit. But the words could find no purchase upon his soul, and he scattered the demonette's dismembered remains amongst the alabaster grosses. At the gate of the inevitable city, the Lord of Change Mkathan offered Drago a path homewards. But in reply, the Grey Knight smote the city walls and left the bird demon entombed amongst the ruins. Through such acts, and many thousand more, did Kaldor Draigo forge a new legend, but this time in a domain where legend is the stuff of life. Now rarely did demons haunt Drago's footsteps. The Grey Knight had time and time again proved his utter resilience to corruption, and had left so many thousands of slaughtered demons in his wake, that not only the most crazed of Khorne's minions continued to seek his death. That anything could exist in the realm of chaos, yet be so utterly immune to the will of the Chaos Gods, was a fresh impossibility in a domain riven with the impossible. If the Dark Gods could not vanquish Drago, then nor could Drago win any meaningful victory. The demons he slew inevitably returned to new bodies. Nurgle's mighty jungle regrew from the ashes, and even the tumbled walls of the inevitable city righted themselves. However, the mortal world was not yet done with the Lord Drago. When the Prophet of Justero forged an alliance with the demon Inkari, who drew a portion of the realm's chaos world into the mortal world. And Drago was drawn along with it. So was Drago briefly reunited with his chapter, for a brotherhood had arrived on Justero to combat Inkari's threat. Drago was clearly long adrift in time, for he knew these warriors not, yet they embraced him as brother, and fighting side by side they cast down the mad Prophet of Justero and banished his demonic allies. Alas, Drago's victory was a hollow one, but when the gateway closed, the Grey Knight found himself back through the rift, and trapped again within the realm of chaos. He had helped bring about the deliverance of Justero, but he could not save himself. Such has been Drago's fate ever since, to walk the realm of chaos for unknowable spans of time, on occasion taking his eternal battle upon the mortal world for brief spans, before being freshly jailed upon victory. It is hard to imagine the fortitude of character that allows Drago to endure such hardship, yet endure it he does. He walks the realm of chaos still, continuing his eternal battle against the Chaos Gods. One day, he will return. So, you're probably gonna notice a couple things about that, except one, it is bloody long. That is a full 2 pages of lore dedicated to this guy. Number 2, it was quite wordy and verbose, but that's quite common of Matt Ward's lore. Also, oh yeah, it's fucking mental. To many people, this was the epitome of bad fanfic writing. Of my super special OC, do not steal. No one could really believe that someone had wrote this. Not that someone had wrote this, but this ended up in an official Warhammer article. Because you think about everything that he did. And Drago, as a newly minted battle brother, meaning that he just recently became a scout, slew a demon. Like a powerful demon at that. Probably on the same level as a demon prince or greater demon. And then he just continues to perform deeds after deeds after deeds that are comparable to Yanis, the founder of the Grey Knights, aka a 1,000-sun marine that had a literal shard of Magnus Primarch power embedded into him. That's who he's matching in only 200 years. After then, he ends up 1v1ing a demonic invasion by the same demon, mind you, who he slayed earlier. He then kills him again, and then gets shot into the realm of chaos, which should, by all accounts, make you go batshit crazy. But he doesn't. This, to be fair, is kind of a bit more believable because he's a Grey Knight. Grey Knights are literally built for this shit, so, you know, it kind of makes sense. You know, with them being incorruptible and all that. But then he goes around wandering, killing everything. He burnt the gardens of Nurgle, the same thing that Big E did, mind you. I know that the lore between that is like a couple decades apart, but still, it's wild. He 1v1'd a greater demon of Khorne, and then drove the demonic taint out of his demon weapon, and then somehow used that demonic metal to forge a new sword. I don't even want to begin to understand the logistics behind that. He then fought 6 handmaidens of Sunesh. Again, the personal handmaidens of Sunesh, I'm thinking, are those keepers of secrets? Are you telling me that he 1v1 6 keepers of secrets and won? And then he fought a Lord of Change and literally broke his city, Now, this doesn't really seem like that big of a deal, but when you realize that Z-chain architecture is meant to be unknowable, unchangeable, it's meant to literally break your mind by looking at it. Z-chain architecture, he's big on that. So Drago being able to just remove that, that's pretty important. All in all, he just continues, so much so that the only people who go after him are Khorne's crazy bastards. Oh yeah, and then randomly he gets shunted back in the material world just to kill more demons. Not to mention, his biggest thing, he fought Mortarion and won, and carved the name of the previous chapter master on his heart. Now, some of you may be saying, oh, but Brad, he had his true name, you know, it's a demon's weakness. That was after this. There's an audio drama detailing the fight between Morty as well as Kaldor, and it does so much to make this bearable. But before this, that was all we got. That little 2 sentences. Oh yeah, Kaldor Draigo 1v1'd a demon Primarch and beat his ass so badly that it allowed him to cut open his chest and carve a name on his heart. That was it. That was it. Simple as. That was it. He's just that badass. So needless to say, people were just, they were done the minute this came out because they're like, what the fuck is this? And the thing is though, you know, credit where credit is due, MathWard doesn't make him incredibly super OP, 100% overpowered, good, happy ending. Well, yeah, he's super overpowered. He does mention that, you know, being in the realm of chaos, it's a never-ending battle. So it doesn't matter how much he does, it doesn't matter. Being trapped in that is also sucks. Not to mention literally being stuck in the realm of the warp and not being able to go of your own volition, briefly being shunted out to see what you're missing then get it back in. That could fuck with someone. Again, that whole archetype of this incredibly powerful character but yet suffers personally, that can work, and it has worked. People like that. It does well. Yet when you throw it all together in one thing, it just seems a little moot. You're like sprinkle a little sugar on top like a pile of chilies. It don't matter that there's sugar there, you still gotta eat the chilies. And I think ultimately that comes down to the main crux of it. Asking the question, why did people react to this lore so badly? And I'm just gonna throw this out here. I don't think that Drago doing all these things is what makes it bad. Now bear with me for a second, let me explain myself. I think the reason why people reacted it so viscerally is because it's just too much. It's like if you're having something sweet, it can be immensely, like decadently sweet. Like ultra caramel ripple fudge supreme with extra vanilla strawberry icing sugar on top. If you have 1 bite of that, it's probably gonna be good. But if you have like 7 bites in, you wanna throw up. And that's what lore like Kaldor Draigo's is. If we were introduced in 5th edition, not as Kaldor Draigo the Supreme Grand Master, but Kaldor Draigo the recently born initiate, who after a grueling battle manages to slay a demon on the power level of a greater demon prince, hey, that's good writing. Next codex or next book, he then becomes a Jessica. Eventually then he becomes chapter master. And then he has that duel with Morty, and this time include the actual duel and not just 2 sentences about, oh yeah, he beat Mortarion. Then in another episode, he then fights Makar again and then realizes, hey, because of this curse, I can't let my boys go on it. So he alone goes. And you know, maybe make it a little less bullshit about how he's able to 1v1 a demonic horde invasion. But you know, that's neither here nor there. It ends with him being shunted into the warp. The next codex entry, next book, it's his shenaniganery in the warp. You know, he ends up fighting the greater demons and all that. And then he comes out of it again, and that's the end of the book. Then another book, he then goes back and fights Drago. Like, you get what I'm saying. If he was introduced like that bit by bit by bit by bit and seeing his story grow and more importantly, giving him more context. Because context with a character like this is king. Just saying, oh yeah, Drago feels sad because nothing he does ever matters. That does not cut the mustard when you need to justify him doing bullshit like 1v1ing a greater demon of Khorne. However, if you write it in a novel or a quote, and it's Drago talking and he's like, I've been here for time uncounted. I've slain this same demon more times than I can remember. And every time it ends the exact same way. The demon does not care, but I do. The demon may be immortal, but I wish I was not. Something like that, right? I just came up with that. That immediately drives home the point so much more than just saying a couple sentences from a codex. Kaldor Draigo is the type of character you need to give him personality. He needs characterization. We need to see his flaws, his struggles, and everything. You have to see that. including him in a codex is just wrong. In fact, the worst thing that happened to Drago was being included in just 2 ultra hyper compressed pages of lore in a codex. He should have been introduced in a book. I would imagine that if he was introduced in a book that spanned like several hundred years, people would be far less egregious towards him, because you get that sense of time scale. But just reading everything like is, the context as well as making up the judgment for yourself is left entirely to your own headcanon, because you gotta figure out how the fuck did this guy 1v1 a demon Primarch. Kaldor Draigo as an idea is not bad, but he was executed incredibly poorly, like really badly. And I think GW also kind of begins to understand this, that Drago existing as a part of a legend is not really that bad. The thing that's bad though is that he just kind of exists there as this little tool to remind people of, oh yeah, super social LC, which is why GW themselves might be moving away from Drago and just having him there as a legend. Taken from Codex Grey Knights, 10th edition. Though Kaldor Draigo is the Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights, he has been in no position to truly lead his chapter for many years, having earned the eternal hatred of the demon Imkar by banishing the entity back to the warp. Drago was drawn into a trap and cursed by the creature when it next manifested in real space. Though he once again succeeded in banishing the demon's corporeal form, Drago was also dragged into the warp and bound within its currents. The raging energies of the realm would have torn apart any other mortal being, but Drago endured. He survived through incomparable strengths of will and purity of spirit, roaming the endless ever-shifting hellscapes of the warp and battling endless legions of demons. In recent times, he has escaped his bonds, however briefly, to aid his chapter during their most crucial battles. Summoning rituals and strange conjunctions have allowed Drago temporary freedom. Though he is continually dragged back to the churning tides of chaos, the Grey Knights have long hoped that his heroic efforts will return him entirely. But hope has become a luxury none can afford in this desperate age. If Kaldor Draigo cannot escape his curse soon, then his successor will have to be named, and his mantle taken from him for the greater good of all mankind. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how you do a codex entry for a character like Drago. Succinct, to the point, and not overly glazing him with all his deeds. Again, GW has kinda like hinted at the fact, oh yeah, Drago may be going away, kinda not really. They might end up doing that thing that they do where technically he's still canon, but you're never going to get another mention of him ever again. Which I don't think they should. I kinda like Drago again as that very powerful character in like the physical sense and when interacting with everyone else, but personally he suffers inwards. And many people also like the type of character, although admittedly it's quite hard to do in this given day and age because people don't understand the concept of personal struggle, and how Lamau I'm sad does not cut the mustard when trying to make a character emotional or trying to make them sympathetic. So, the story of the Supreme Grand Master is now up in the air. What GW will eventually do with him is anyone's guess, but the fact of the matter is they've been trying to slowly change him, and we see this throughout Codex and Codex, the main thing being that audio drama where they try to make him a little bit more, I want to say realistic, but that just feels like the wrong word. I guess not bullshit would be a much better way to describe it. But again, I said it earlier, and I'll say it again, I like Drago as a character, and I hope they continue his story. Would love to see a new model for him and some new lore about him being this legendary figure, kind of like the Green Knight from Bretonnian lore. He appears when he is most needed, just out of the blue and then just disappears back again. And him being this eternal vigil, this watcher character, the Warden of the Warp. That is actually a cool title, Kaldor Draigo, the Warden of the Warp. I'd like to see him take that type of character direction. Because, you know, having a really strong, overpowered character is not a bad thing. It just has to be done in good enough doses. As I mentioned earlier, the whole dessert analogy. Too much sweet at one point makes your mouth go all funny. I mean, 40k has its own slew of overpowered characters. The Emperor, the Silent King, I mean hell, some of the Phoenix Lords even, Primarchs you could argue. These are all incredibly overpowered characters. But there's enough there to them that people can enjoy them without just being memed on. And that then comes to why a lot of people love Kaldor Draigo. The memes. It's no small secret that TTS did a lot for the character, but this idea of Drago just being absolutely batshit crazy, but just being this kooky old guy that's revered because he's stuck in literal hell is really funny, and the memes are great. People absolutely love them, and I am also a fan of them as well. But in the end of it all, Kaldor Draigo's lore represents a lot of lore in 40k. GW will often introduce a topic or a story or a character, and it be kinda half-baked, or a little bullshit. Their process then involves them spending the next years, in some cases a decade or so, literally changing and molding the character, adding more context to it, and eventually crafting and making a lore that is actually really good and actually enjoyable to engage with. It makes you love the character or the concept. A prime example of this are Primaris Marines. We all know the absolute clusterfuck of the introduction that was the Primaris Marines, but 10 years later, their lore is looking pretty good. Now granted, it did take them 10 years to fix it, but they did something with it. The other alternative for GW when it comes to lore is literally just taking it out back and putting the old double barrel treatment. Offering lip service to the concept of it, not outright coming out and saying, oh no, this is no longer canon, but for all intents and purposes, any more lore or new items towards this is just non-existent. Basically, they stick them in this limbo of forever purgatory. Not exactly wanting to remove the lore, but definitely not knowing what to do with it, so they do nothing. A prime example being the Ynnari, which was supposed to be the next coming of the Eldari Empire, and now most people forget that they even exist. And when it comes to problematic lore, that is the two main avenues. Now as to what GW is deciding to do with Kaldor Draigo yet, we don't know. What we got in 10th edition is very much a, ooh, it's on the cusp, but a lot of people have been kinda assuming that Kaldor Draigo is going to be going the way of the dodo because we didn't get any rules for him in this regard, so they're thinking he's going to transfer into being a lore-only character, which makes sense. It's a fine way to handle it, but again, I like him as being an active character because, like, this guy who just appears out of nowhere to spite shit, kind of like a Doomslayer, those are cool characters and we like them for it. But ultimately, when looking at the fate of Kaldor Draigo, one needs to look at what is the best fate for the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights have always been an interesting chapter and always kind of hard to balance, I want to say, in terms of lore. Because on one hand, they're supposed to be incredibly powerful, incredibly potent, and worth at least a couple other dozen chapters in terms of their sheer raw strength, with them not only being all psychers, but them literally having some of the best arms and armor of the entire Imperium, second only to maybe the Custodes. But then the downside by this is the fact that they live incredibly short and brutal lives. It's that trade-off. Incredible power, but your personal life suffers. And in that vein, I would make the argument that Drago existing as a character would be the epitome of the faction. The strongest Grey Knight, yet who suffers the most. I think he would be a very good and succinct way to introduce someone to the concept of Grey Knight. Because whilst many people may know about the Grey Knights, because whilst people might know about the existence of the Grey Knights, very few people know about the more detailed intricacies. The Grey Knight books, when they're done well, they are incredibly enjoyable reads. And you can easily understand why someone would fall in love with these silver paladins of Titan. Yet, I don't know what it is, but Grey Knights just haven't really caught on in terms of like being a shiny faction. They're not like the Black Templars or the Crimson Fists, where people absolutely love them and they're diehard. I mean, me myself, I've only ever met one Grey Knight fan, and he likes them because they kill demons. So, as to what exactly they should be for the greater faction, I think having Drago to be that point and stare thing of like, oh, how would you describe like a Grey Knight? Just give them like the short story about the introduction of Drago and that's a Grey Knight. But ultimately, Kaldor Draigo is a character that was created by a very bad author, and his entire story of his character is GW frantically trying to right the wrongs of one guy's trippy power character, and just, it's unfortunate, but ultimately, Drago exists as a warning. If you're going to do something cool, epic, and awesome, do it properly, and by doing it properly, I mean do it in small increments. Take time and effort into focus into each individual element. Don't just throw everything into a fucking bucket and expect it to turn out alright like chili. But as for the fate of the Supreme Grandmaster, none can say. But whether or not he ever remains in the warp, or we'll see his odd introduction here and there in a short story or a book, one thing is most definitely for certain. He does indeed like a tangerine. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for watching. Let me know down below, what do you guys think about Mr. Kaldor Draigo? As I said, I love him. I love this idea that he's this like magical creature, like the boogeyman of the warp. I think that's fucking cool. And again, it wouldn't take much to make people more sympathetic towards him. Short story about how, yeah, everything sucks, but I do because I'm the warden of the warp and somebody gotta do. I think that would fix it. But let me know down below. Do you guys like Kaldor Draigo's lore? Would you want him to stay in like the Grey Knight lore as a semi-present character, or should he just be shunted back into like Legends? Love to hear your thoughts down below. But I want to say a massive thank you to you guys for watching, but even more massive thank you to my awesome members and Patreons. Shout out to my Lieutenant tier members, Mr. Eddie V3 and Miss Majora of the Void. Shout out to my Sergeant tier members, Mr. Damiak, Mr. Wolfsmith.Fireheart, Mr. Andy McGee, Mr. Bowen, Mr. Sean IRL7, Mr. Matthew Merrill, Mr. Sergeant Cossack, 68W173D, and Mr. That Guy. Shout out to my corporate tier members, Mr. Tremail the Math Kitty, Lord Rosarius, Tech Priest Toaster, Mr. Bowen, Shauna Smithers, The Gentle Salamander, The Wench of Warhammer, Major Doshinect, Edward King, and Mr. Overanalyze This. And finally, but absolutely not least, shout out to my private tier members, Mr. Thomas Moslons, Mr. Ivan_SBW, Mr. Monkeyman, Mr. Michael Aeda, Mr. Diego Castro, Mr. Portus Unum, Mr. CMD Nay, Mr. Eric Massaro, Mr. Dom Marek, Mr. Ken_Sakura333, Mr. Adrian Von Furen, Mr. Morally Bankrupt, Mr. Matthew Peter, Mr. Joshly 1320, Mr. Adrex X1, Mr. Ethan Elam U71, Mr. Kiri Khan, Mr. Malpace-XB1XE, and Mr. Robert Makorovich. Thank you. I love you. I appreciate you. Someday with our memberships, get a bunch of awesome benefits, behind the scenes stuff, early access to these videos, special roles on the Discord. Join the Discord, it's bumping baby, but remember, this will always be free. So whether you give your boy $1 or not, I shall love you just the same. Mwah! But yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know, what are some more characters you'd like me to cover down below? I don't mind doing these shorter like videos. I know I recently did a pseudo bookish review type nonsense. I may work this into the new format of me doing like a pseudo bookish review and then like these more character focused episodes. But hey, let me know down below what you guys want to see and I'll make sure to do it for you. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the Jano Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you so very much for watching. Y'all make sure to stay loyal there, boys and gals. And I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers! Also, I know GW will never do this, but I really wish TTS's version of Kaldor Draigo was canon. Incredibly powerful, but literally fucking mentally off the hinges. Like, that's such a fun character to me.
I must go. My planet needs me.
I suspect he was high on narcotics.